of things to discuss in this podcast today.
A lot of heavy topics today.
Yes.
For sure.
And going right into it, thank you so much for tuning into this episode.
Yeah. If you're here for episode 4, thanks so much. We're going to be discussing one of HBO's newest, if not the newest, documentary that came out on the 12th called Teen Torture Incorporated. And there was a lot of heavy stuff that came out in that documentary that we just really wanted to bring awareness to, discuss all the themes that kind of come along with what was opened up in that documentary.
Yeah, and a lot of eye-opening topics and things that I honestly didn't even know were happening while we're able to live our lives here in this country.
It's shocking.
And I just wanted to say thank you. You were the one that originally showed me the documentary. Mm-hmm. A lot of the times I don't really get to open myself up to these type of topics because I do tend to stay away from dark-sided things that are going on or dark-sided documentaries, especially
it's heavy. Mm-hmm. I watching the documentary was hard. Talking about it and planning this podcast has been hard in itself, just because it's so heavy and so dark. And I guess as people that just are trying to work on growth or happiness, it's hard to digest dark topics, so we tend to try to do them in doses and not all the time. The other big documentary that came out, was that on HBO as well?
Yes.
Quiet on Set.
Quiet on Set.
Right, yeah. Quiet on Set was a really hard watch as well. We weren't up and live on the podcast when that came out. We kind of want to cover all the stuff the documentary exposed and all the, strings and stuff that leads into. The documentary was basically tore the band-aid off of these shows that were really popular in the 2000s. I mean, it's been happening for decades, but it's been getting covered up because there's so much money in it. Mm-hmm. But the documentary basically told us that it's been happening for a long time. It's funded really well and there's a lot of money involved, so that's why it's been hushed for so long.
A lot of notorious leaders that we look up to were funding these projects.
And endorsing Dr. Phil and Beyond Scared Straight and all the shows and media that helped build these programs and platforms. I don't know if, for those of you that are familiar with Dr. Phil, I used to see my parents watch that when I was a kid, and I always thought Dr. Phil was so weird. I always thought it was a really weird way of discipline. I thought he was very narcissistic, and it was just humiliate the teenager and send them off to this camp and
publicity.
A behavior modification camp because there's something wrong with the teen, rather than maybe they're seeking help or they need healing or they're neglected or whatever they're going through. There's been this huge agenda and message amongst Hollywood and shows and movies and just media in general, and being endorsed by politicians we know and big names we know with money, that the teen has always been the problem. Mm-hmm. That there's something wrong with the teen's so disrespectful, or they need behavior modification, or a correctional facility or a boot camp to fix them, as though there's something wrong with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said that your family watched a lot of that growing up.
Yeah.
I was the complete opposite.
Yeah.
My mom was very structured and limiting on what I could watch, and that was definitely one thing that was not on the table for discussion.
She didn't like those,
No, she didn't like anything that involved displaying adolescent behavioral psychology.
So she didn't agree with the Dr. Phil mindset.
No, definitely not.
Good
yeah,
for
absolutely, her. Yeah. She was a adolescent psychologist herself, and she has her bachelor's in that field, and she really tried to shelter me from a lot of the darkness that was going on.
Yeah.
And although I am very appreciative of that, I would have also liked to known what other kids were going through.
Yeah.
And maybe understood how really grateful I was to have the family and the mother that I do have, and the support that I had growing up. I didn't really understand. I mean, I was grateful for what I had. Don't get me wrong. Like, I love my family to death. I love everything that they stand by. I didn't know that other kids really had it that much worse.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you mean. I feel like my family was the opposite. It was always like I was raised very Christian, so I feel like a lot of Christian parents said things like this, like, "Oh, someone's always got it worse." Like, think about this kid and that kid. And like when you're in church, there's like a lot of testimonies going on. People go up on the stage and like share their testimonies about their terrible life or experiences and then say how they like found God and stuff like that. So I kind of grew up hearing all the terrible stuff that
Mm,
goes on and it kind of being shoved in my face that you have it good. And that's kind of like similar to being emotionally available and safe parents, allowing your child to have the emotions they're having and letting them be validated
yeah.
regardless of if people have it worse or not. That was just a big agenda in parenting when we were growing up. And even like kids like Paris Hilton and Bad Baby, who got really famous from Dr. Phil, Danielle Rivoli, and a lot of other people that went through stuff like that. It was just a big theme, I think, in parenting, at least where I was at. We know we're not parents, but like we were those children before, the rebellious teen, the troubled teen that like got looked down upon for acting out. And we know the harm it brings. We know the harm invalidation of feelings brings in an unsafe atmosphere
Mm,
with your family or your parent or whoever it is. That's so detrimental, and it's not something I would want any kid to feel like. I remember feeling like that. I'm so glad, I didn't get put through a camp or something like that because that's terrible.
mm,
But my heart goes out to the ones that did, and just this whole style of the troubled teen and teens being wrong and parents never being accountable or held for anything is just not right. And I feel like this is a huge root that relates to all of the mental illness in high schools and teens and even in young adults and in like our society in general. Like a lot of it stems from childhood, and a lot of people don't think about that or realize that a lot of most mental illness, if not, yeah, like most mental illness roots back to your childhood. And so many things are undealt with. It's so important those early years, like between the child and the parent, that safety and that bond. Most times, like the parents that are going through that with their children, it's like they were just like that when they were a teenager.
mm.
So it just doesn't even make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
Like, you need to just relate with people and understand where they're at, validate them. Like, people aren't acting out for no reason. You know what I mean? Like, people aren't, especially adolescents. That's something I've never understood, is like blaming the child for anything, is because what adolescent comes into this world just like wanting to have a bad relationship with their parents, like wanting corruption and rebellion and all this stuff? Like, they do that stuff because they're not getting enough attention, enough love, safety, whatever it may be. Like, they get pushed there. Children are reactors, they're not like persecutors,
Yeah.
you know?
Absolutely. I know you're going over people that have gone through those facilities and those programs. Can you shed a little bit of information about what your mom went through?
Yeah. Teen Challenge was mentioned in the documentary, and that was a little shocking to me because my own mom, who has since passed away, who had always had a problem with like drugs and drinking and pills, she went to a camp called Teen Challenge, and I didn't know it was like a franchise, but it is. Teen Challenge is like this big franchise across, I think, the whole country, if not, also out of the country. One of their facilities, one of their teen facilities got shut down. The documentary told us that, like, one of their teen facilities has been shut down because there was abuse and stuff going on there. And I just wonder what was being forced down her throat when she was at camps like that. Or I just, that's like something I could talk about for a long time, but I just, I've always felt bad for my mom and what was kind of like pushed into her head and forced for her to think, just because she had a problem with addiction or brokenness or her self-worth. I feel like that's what all the teenagers that went to those programs were struggling with. They were struggling with neglect. They wanted attention from their parents. They were broken, or had broken stuff going on in their homes or in their families, and then they got blamed for their behavior when they really just needed more parental attention. And it's just astonishing to me that instead of trying to heal and love your child and understand why they're feeling the way that they're feeling or acting the way that they're acting, it's like, oh, something's wrong with them, or they get like labeled as so many things, bad things, instead of like recognizing that, oh, my child is acting like this probably because of that,
Yeah.
which to me seems a lot more logical and makes more sense. But instead, it's like they send them to these camps and stuff that just traumatize them further. It doesn't fix anything. It's not therapy.
No, absolutely not. If anything, as we discussed, you rip the identity away from these kids. And the second not to mention a lot of the stories that I've come across, they strip them from their homes without even knowing it's going to happen.
Yeah.
They shave off their heads.
Yeah.
And when you do that to somebody, you blend in with the other people. You forget who you are.
Yeah, I think that's the point.
Yeah, absolutely. And that doesn't help like the cause of what that teen actually needs.
Yeah, of course. They're just like stripping them of everything they know and telling them how to be and everything, yelling at them. It's like they would like yell in their faces, and one of the girls said they were getting drugged 2 to 3 times a day with like they would like shoot them with something to make them fall asleep. There was isolation rooms that they would throw them in for days or hours at a time. It's crazy. Like, it reminds me a little bit of like the Nickelodeon stuff. Like, these teens were mistreated, and then when they grew up and got DUIs or shaved their heads or went crazy, it was like, oh wow, Britney Spears is crazy, or Drake Bell is terrible. Look at what he's doing.
What happened to them when they were younger.
Yeah, and it's like, do we never stop to think why? Like, do we never stop to think like, what would push someone there? What would make somebody do that?
No, because MTV, TMZ, all these other productions really wanted to show the nation that these were just angry teenagers who needed to let out all these emotions, and they just wanted to tarnish their reputation.
They were crazy.
Yeah. They made more money to tarnish their reputation and tear them down as individuals.
It was publicity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. At the end of the day, that's what it is.
End of the day, it comes back to the dollar. Like, I think they even showed footage of, was it Bush? Who was the president?
Yeah, George W. Bush.
George W. Bush, one of our presidents, was shown footage in the documentary of him endorsing these programs for teens, the same programs that either have been shut down or found out of crimes, and there's still like programs open that are still going and happening, and there's still abuse happening in a lot of these camps, but the documentary did show a number of them that have been shut down, a number of them people that have been arrested, but there's camps like this all over the country and outside of the country, and they were saying in the documentary, like, this still isn't over. There's still more camps, still more kids being mistreated and stuff like that, and one of our own presidents was one to endorse these programs, and it just goes to show you how important money is to our leaders and to the people at the top, I guess you could say. They will take your bribe before they save your child.
Well, not only that too, but it just shows how much security these programs have when they're backed by religious purposes.
Protected. Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah. And when they
It's,
have the faith and the act of God, it's really hard to look at something as abuse.
and you put religion in it.
Yes,
And you can, like, the moment religion is involved, you can skew something any way that you want.
for sure.
Like, oh, this is. I mean, we've seen it countless times. The Waco documentary.
Mhm.
I could go on.
Or use religious
Yeah, they literally like would use scripture in the
as
documentary.
as a way of you know this more than me.
Spare the rod and spoil the child.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, they
And
would use that one a lot at the camps.
and the fact that you have to use something from a book to justify your abuse.
Well, also, there's just, I mean, many examples of when people take the Bible and use it for like bad things and flip stuff around. And so, yeah, the moment that you tell the government religion's involved or we can do this, we can be excused because of our religious beliefs, like that's when it gets sticky. And not only that, but I think majority of it was the money. Like they were bribing politicians, bribing government officials to keep this protected under wraps, to not only keep it under wraps but to endorse it. Like he was making speeches endorsing these programs, and Dr. Phil endorsing these programs, and it's connected directly to his show.
Can we really talk about how a lot of these shows, especially with MTV pushing out shows like Bad Girls Club and other shows like Jackass,
Yeah.
countless others, really pushing this idea of teens being rebellious.
Yeah, making it like encouraging that like rebellious attitude and making it look funny and entertaining and cool. You said I specifically remember my sisters watching Bad Girls Club, like Jersey Shore and like all those shows that were directed for teens to watch, basically kind of encouraging that rebellious behavior. Yeah, is that what you're saying?
No, absolutely.
Like, yeah.
And we see a lot of that through the late 90s, early 2000s, this whole period of a rise of aggression, a rise of rebellion. Woodstock 99 being like one of the peak moments where teens just, we see on a small scale of teens really pushing this anger gene.
Yeah, like that was like really big for teens acting out at Woodstock, right?
Absolutely.
And it simultaneously the media was pushing out Dr. Phil and Beyond Scared Straight and shows like that for like the parents and adults to watch while their teens watched MTV and rebellious endorsing shows.
And you think that's like a coincidence?
I don't. Like, yeah. I think like it all seems full circle, you know? It's like everything is like just stacked like dominoes to just for teens to fail, you know? Like they endorse this agenda of troubled teens, and then they encourage teens, tell them it looks funny and cool and it's cool and all that stuff to be rebellious, to do what you want, to act out, and then you know, encourage those kids through shows and movies and media and stuff like that, and then also tell the parents that your kid is wrong, they need to be corrected, they need to be sent to a boot camp when they act like this. So it's just to kind of rein in how you said, do you think it's a coincidence? I don't, because it's literally public knowledge that our own Pentagon has a film budget. So the Pentagon is governing a lot of films that go through Hollywood, you know, a lot of shows that are coming out.
So it wouldn't be obscene to think that there was an agenda behind
absolutely
this
not.
time period, behind Dr. Phil.
Yeah, to answer your question.
Being
like,
a puppet, to be...
Of course. To answer your question, I absolutely do not think it was a coincidence. It seems like a plan. You know, let's push this agenda, make parents think this, make kids think this, and then put them in these camps that we make loads of money off of. And lots of leaders were endorsing this stuff, and I mean now a lot of them are being shut down because those kids are grown ass adults now and they're like speaking up and trying to change things, and they have done a lot of good, but there's still a lot more camps that are open.
I also want to say that a lot of these programs, and you know, I really want to call them camps instead of programs.
Yeah.
They have some crazy techniques that stem back to similar techniques that we saw in Nazi internment camps.
Yeah, like prison
Chinese internment camps, concentration camps.
The documentary said they literally used the same methods and
Mm-hmm.
stuff in these teen programs.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Behavior modification.
yeah. In the documentary, they literally say they could be friends of someone who owned the facility
Yeah,
or camp.
like there was no background checks being done.
And no background checks
on the
being
employees.
done. It could have been anybody, not trained professionals that they
Yeah.
said in the brochures. The brochures, they said that they had psychologists that were ready to take on these troubled teens, that they had the correct amount of people to really make sure that your teen was corrected and your teen will come back a better teen.
Yeah. And it's apparently not all teen programs. They said this in the documentary, but there's no way of knowing which ones are bad and which ones are good. A majority of them are just abuse camps. Mm-hmm. And maybe some of them are not doing those things, but how can you know? And happening.
I hope they continue to exploit these endorsed.
Yeah. And you can
camps.
I think there's ways to help if you want to. We can link everything for you. But I know there's websites for donations, for petitions, stuff like that, to kind of help any way you can towards shutting these camps down or getting awareness about this.
I will definitely be putting the link in the description.
Yeah.
They are not backing down when it comes to allowing people to be heard with their stories, which is also incredible.
Yeah, I'm glad this documentary, I hope it gets the publicity deserved.
And I agree. And
that's another reason, like, we wanted to bring this on the pod and spend a whole episode on it, because I think it needs awareness. I think it, we want to do a little bit of our part by bringing awareness, hopefully through talking about it on the podcast. Please go watch the documentary. Yeah. It's a tough watch, but it's eye-opening, and there's a lot of full circle stuff happening all around the world that is just planned, and it kind of all just comes back to the dollar,
Oh, it's crazy. And even in the documentary, they really discussed that it wasn't about correcting the behavior of the teen or the child. It was just how much money can they bring in by that child being in that facility.
Yeah, what was it like? They were paying like
$50,000 a year
a kid per child.
Per child.
Just like robbing these parents of not only their child's sanity, but their wallets for about $50,000 a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's quite funny and admirable what Bad Baby did.
Oh my god, yeah.
Like, I think, we all made fun of her at first, and we thought it was crazy, like, she looks like an idiot, but she was actually so smart. She flipped the script on the whole thing. It was like what we're discussing now, she already understood before she went on Dr. Phil. She already knew that there was this agenda that, everything's blame the kid, no blame the parent, Dr. Phil's a narcissist. Like, she knew all of that before she even stepped foot on that stage. Mm-hmm. And she literally talks about in the documentary how she knew that, and she just decided to play along and play their game and kind of flip the script on them, and that's exactly what she did, and I think it's pretty badass. Like, in a, I don't know, guilty pleasure kind of way, I love Bad Baby. I think it's dope that she was a neglected, child that was seeking attention from her parents, and she got put on Dr. Phil and forced to go to one of those camps, that were terrible. Yeah, is that where she went?
Turnabout Ranch.
Yeah, and she was forced to go to one of those camps, like, against her will, and she just, she got super famous off of Dr. Phil. She's gotten her bag because of it. Like, I just think it's dope that she flipped the script.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of like a fuck you.
Yeah.
And she came out about her after she was famous after she went to Dr. Phil. She went to the program, and then she came out and told everyone that the program was terrible. And Dr. Phil was shown in the documentary, like, he was like, oh, well, she had a bad experience. We have nothing to do with those programs. Yeah. Like, blah, blah, blah.
It wasn't until someone got big and exploited what they do. That's when they pulled up, they put their hands up, oh, we don't know.
Yeah.
We put it on the parent to go research and go around the facility and we put it in our documents when they sign. It's on the parent.
Yeah, they're like, oh, it's up to the parents
up to the parent.
Like,
what
at
a
their
sick
discretion.
twisted way to like really.
Yeah.
You already know that parents going through some very psychological stress themselves by thinking that they're the problem. They're the reason why their kid is this way.
And they're kind of manipulating the parents too, coercing them into like doing stuff like this, like, oh, something's wrong with your child, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
It's all bullshit, and
It's crazy.
I'm honestly thankful for Danielle Bergoli, because she actually, in this like specific topic, she actually might have been a big figure for change, you know, in this arena, because she got famous and brought awareness to it. Paris Hilton did the same thing. I was about to say. She like,
a lot of people were able to actually stand up when they felt like they didn't have the platform or the backing that they probably would have had if those celebrities and those big
and simply
entertainers didn't use their platform for.
And like, because of media too, like because of people like us that can go on our phones and follow Danielle Bergoli and stuff, and she can speak directly to us, you know, because we've made her famous. I think that's huge. I think like it's getting harder and harder to keep secrets and hush things, and create false agendas when we all have our own phones, our own cameras, our own social media platforms to directly tell people what's going on. Yeah, it's like every mass event that happens now, there's like 100 to 500 like different angles and different recordings of the same situation, because everyone has a phone now and everyone can whip out their phone and start recording, and there's like a million videos of the same thing.
Yeah, and I really used to think like that was a negative thing, like, oh man, it's terrible. Like you see all this like paparazzi or like, you know, all these documentaries that, or like you go to an event and everybody has their phone and you're like, oh, how are they enjoying the event?
Yeah.
But in reality, like, what if they just captured something that was happening behind the scenes that no one saw?
There's never too much press when you need evidence and stuff like that. So
absolutely.
I mean, it can be a good thing.
Growing up with my mom, she was a psychologist, and she really put on me that, you know, therapy was a big way for me to overcome my obstacles in life, or really, and meditation was really a way for me to ground myself and to really collect myself with my emotions, my anger. Meditation is very huge, and I'm really grateful that she showed me how to deal with that, because I was a very emotional teen, super emotional.
I think, who isn't, you know what I mean? Like, every teen is like going through puberty and like all these crazy hormones. And they're just like looked down on because of it. And
it's crazy that we still don't really understand fully how that takes on. Like, we all deal with it or go through puberty in a different way.
Yeah. And I think it's like super important to be delicate with your teen at those stages, because that whole like concept, don't talk unless you're talked to, or, you know, because I said, anytime you just like give a response to a parent, you're either disrespecting them or making an excuse.
Yeah.
And it's like that.
It makes your child not feel heard.
Yeah, and so unsafe. There's no trust in the relationship. There's no safety. And when it comes to like your child's in a dangerous situation, they're not going to trust you to save them, or not going to trust you to be like, mom or dad, this happened to me, or this experience, this is what I'm going through. They're never going to do that to you if you treat them like a child and you treat them like they're just rebellious and disrespectful and as if they're not valid. Being validated is so huge. And I think that like
vulnerability too.
Yeah, I think like, you know, a lot of parents, I think it's changing more now with like millennials becoming parents and stuff like that, but before that, it was so like such a big theme of like kind of just like the rub some dirt in it mentality, like, you know, I'm the parent, you're the child mentality, like, you know, you couldn't be sensitive, you weren't allowed to cry, you know, stuff like that, like, is so detrimental. And maybe the parents at the time didn't even realize how damaging their parenting style was. Maybe that's just how our grandparents were and how their parents were and all they've ever known. So I understand change takes time, but it's okay to shed light on the fact that, you know, that was a detrimental way of parenting.
Absolutely.
And to not validate someone's emotions, that just leaves long-lasting scars on your child they'll have more mental disorders and mental illnesses and things to deal with and trauma and things to work through in their adulthood than they would have if you just would have been a safer parent.
Absolutely. And I really, with this podcast episode, I really want to push the concept that, if you are experiencing something with your child or your teen, not to just send them to these correctional facilities, because that's not what they are.
Yeah,
you're sending
abusive camps,
and they'll tell you things like,
torture
if
camps.
you don't send them to these camps, they're gonna die.
Yeah, like that's what I was saying about the coercion to the parents. And
I just really want to say to like anybody watching this episode, for sure, that we really only have one shot for those that we love in our lives, and to really hold them close and to really cherish them and to really make them feel heard.
Yeah,
something that's crucial and critical to the development of our lives, to the ongoing growth of our characteristic and our personalities,
especially in adolescence.
And watching this documentary really brought me to tears, because
it was heavy.
It's super heavy, and just think twice when you even come across these programs. Wilderness Project, whatever they rebrand themselves as, they have many names.
They keep changing their names.
Yeah, they still carry the same. They will persuade you with having the kids that are there act a certain way, get them the help that they need, but not the help that might seem like the right way. Definitely do your research.
Yeah.
And I'm not a parent myself, so I'm not gonna say.
Yeah, we're not gonna sit here and act like we know how to perfectly parent. We aren't parents. We understand that, but we do know, don't send your kid to a torture camp, please. Yes, and we agree that these are our opinions. We agree that Dr. Phil was detrimental and not helpful. Beyond Scared Straight is detrimental and not helpful. All of those pushy, abusive shows, it's not helpful to anybody.
No.
It actually creates more suicide rates, more mental illness. This is even another full circle example. I just thought of this. Not only will it push suicide rates and mental illnesses, but because they're getting pushed further into mental illness or developing more mental illnesses, PTSD and stuff like that from those camps, that will drive up mental illness medication as well. So that goes back to full circle about the dollar, and why this is so protected is because not only are the camps making so much money, but Big Pharma is making a lot of money from the medication of mental illnesses, and therapists are making a lot of money off of kids that are traumatized and having to go to therapy and all those things that they're going to have to go through now to actually get back to a normal life is also going to cost them a bunch of money. So it's a whole big circle of greed and money and not caring about our children. I think anything involving minors and children should be so heavily under scrutiny and watched hella surveillance. It should just be taken really seriously, because an adolescent is not old enough to understand what's happening to them, what they're going through. I think they always need to be very protected. This goes back to the Nickelodeon thing again. It's just, we need to take children more seriously. Believe your child. They're not lying to you for no reason. Why would a child do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And really wrapping up this episode, I just wanted to just say that if you haven't, give the documentary a watch. It goes over some very things that we need to make sure we are informed about.
Really just want to encourage people to, like you said, give the documentary a watch and be aware of this. If you're a parent, I think you may not advocate for gentle parenting, but you don't have to advocate for neglect either.
Absolutely.
And
let's work together to make sure that these camps, I think that's the proper way to call them, instead of facilities, let's make sure that we keep exploiting them and taking them down one by one.
Yeah, but even in Lakeland, they had Lakeland Girls School. What's that called?
Lakeland Girls Academy.
Is that what it's called?
I think so.
Lakeland Girls Academy. Like, even the Lakeland Girls Academy got shut down for that stuff, and that was like shocking to me because I used to live in Lakeland, and like I know people that went to schools in Lakeland. That was shocking.
It's crazy the things that happen so close to us.
Yeah. They were saying the ways to change this is, through awareness, legislation, and just, I think, just like perseverance of going through, each state and each camp being shut down. And I don't think we only wanted to shed light just in the documentary, but the whole troubled teen, parenting style and agenda, that I feel like that's just been like overtaking us for decades. It was only when millennials started becoming parents that this gentle parenting thing came about. And probably a direct result of kids realizing maybe we shouldn't beat kids into submission.
Yeah.
I will say they did show in the documentary them speaking with, I think it was the governor of Missouri, and he was speaking in the documentary, and they changed the laws and stuff. They got the legislation like
Yeah, I think it was
approved.
Law 577.
Yeah, I think it was something like that, and it looked like what the Missouri governor had to say seemed like he cared, and he was actually making changes. So hopefully that's true, and
I hope this just becomes a trickle down effect where
Yeah.
we continue to see more states, more legislation pass to really help.
if you made it all the way through this extremely dark and heavy topic today, thank you. It was a bit hard for us to get through, and it was hard to watch the documentary, and we honestly even had some trouble getting through the podcast because it's really heavy. So if you stayed the whole time, thank you for watching. We appreciate if you could help bring awareness. We'll link everything. We'll do all the pop-ups for you to watch the documentary, for you to find the websites you can to either just share and bring awareness, whatever you can do if you don't have money to donate. But there's donations as well and stuff like that to help these problems. So thank you guys for tuning in. We love you
thank
so much.
Yes, we do. We love you a lot. Bye.